Good evening, seniors, and welcome to our fourth online lecture for AP Government. Today's topic is National Security Policy. So, where we're going to go with today, I'm going to try to quickly define what exactly national security is. There's lots of big different definitions out there. I encourage you to read about them. Go ahead and do a Google search. I'll try to do a quick summary. I will then try to do quick significant changes in national security throughout American history. I'll do my very best to limit how much I talk about history, and then move into current issues. What are current issues facing America and its security? So, defining national security. So, I want to differentiate national security policy from foreign policy. So, foreign policy is choices made about how the American government and its citizens interact with the rest of the world. Just interacting, how we deal with one another, how we trade, how we exchange culture, how we support one another. Foreign policy is kind of a bigger circle. National security policy is one specific way of either looking at that circle or a smaller piece within it. Lots of different ways to think about it, but my point is they're not the same. So national security policy is actions taken to protect America, and Americans' ability to live freely and not be negatively affected by non-Americans. So, protecting America, Americans, and Americans' way of life. So, the important goals of national security. One, the most basic one that we've talked about before in one of our 5 functions of government, we remember, yes, right? Protect from invasion. Right? That's the most basic level. The next is protect our allies. So we have people that we have treaties with that we help protect. They help protect us. We have very close relationships. Examples are Canada, England, Mexico, France. Right? We have very close relations with them. If they get in trouble, we are willing to protect them because they would do the same for us. And the next is the more tricky, vague area that often doesn't get talked about, but is extremely important to national security. This is protecting our economic interests. So examples. We talked about before in the last lecture the importance of oil. We need oil for our economy to function. We need that energy, yes? Well, we get some of that oil from the ground in the United States. We get some of it from Canada. We get some of it from up in Alaska, and it has to go through Canada. But we also said we get a lot of that oil from the Middle East. And the Middle East, part of the reason we are concerned about the Middle East is, yes, we want to spread democracy, but we also want to make sure that we have that consistent flow of oil at a reasonable price. If there's political unrest and chaos in the Middle East, the price of oil is going to go up because it's going to be more difficult for us to get at it. Other economic interests, well, we have companies, right, that operate all over the globe but are headquartered here in the United States, and we want them to do well in other countries. What's one example of that? Let's see if I can draw it correctly. Right? McDonald's. McDonald's is a multinational corporation. We want to make sure that McDonald's does well in other countries because every dollar McDonald's makes in another country, well, some of that ends up right back here. So we need our resources, we need the oil, we want our companies to do well, but we also want more and more friends. We want more and more allies. If more countries are willing to work with us and trade with us, then we have more places that we can sell our things. We can sell American culture. We can sell American goods. So many people think China might be an enemy. Oh, no. China is very close because they are very tied to our economic interests. We need China. We need the cheap labor in China to be able to make all the things that we buy. This iPad that I'm working with right now, right, designed in California, built in China. So we are very close trading partners. Our economies rely on one another functioning. All right, so going a little bit closer into national security. Again, protecting America, Americans, our lives, and our way of life. So the government officials involved in national security. The big guy, the most important one, is the president. I want you to remember, why is he number one? Okay, he needs to be the person that's ultimately in charge of national security. He's the chief diplomat, commander-in-chief. Number one, because we need to be able to make most and many national security decisions very quickly. We don't want to necessarily have to go through Congress or get approval of everyone. If we're being attacked, we need to be able to move the military. If we have an issue with another country, we want one person to be in charge, not a wide range of other people. Closely working with national security, so protecting us, is the State Department and the Defense Department. The State Department does a lot of diplomacy. They are in charge of diplomatic relations for the U.S. The most important people that you need to know about the State Department, well, is the Secretary of State. So they're the head diplomat for the United States after the President. The current Secretary of State is John Kerry, former Senator John Kerry. It used to be Hillary Clinton. She stepped down, and now John Kerry is Secretary of State. He has ambassadors that live in all of our allies' countries around the world that keep up good relations with other countries. So the Defense Department, which we're going to focus a lot more on today. So it's led by the Secretary of Defense. So he's a civilian. Currently it is former Senator Hagel, so Defense Secretary Hagel, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are the heads of each branches of the military, so Army, Navy, Air Force, so on and so forth. And so they together run the military, deciding what they're going to spend money on, what troops they're going to do, and they are the commanders after the president of our soldiers. Also, of course, involved in national security, we do not want to forget about Congress, right? So they have the ability to set the budgets for the Defense Department, the State Department, the President, right? So they're in charge of money, can't forget about that. So they have certain oversight functions to make sure that the first three were spending their money correctly, also this last one. And then the Senate also has constitutional power to approve treaties. So anytime we make an official agreement with another country, the Senate has to approve treaties. So let's just make sure we make the note there. So Senate. All right. And finally, and we're not going to talk tons about them because we could talk forever, is the intelligence agencies. So we have the military, we have our diplomats, we have the president controlling them, and also underneath there we have the intelligence agencies. They gather information about other countries, what's going on, our enemies, our allies. There are spies. So most famous intelligence agencies, there's many, but the two I want you to know are the Central Intelligence Agency. All right, they're the most famous. And there's also another one called the NSA, the National Security Agency. So CIA spies and unmanned airplanes, the drones that can currently can assassinate terrorists from the sky. And then the NSA does a lot of the electronic computing of the spying, so wiretapping and computer hacking and lots of other things that we'll never know about unless we work for the NSA. Alright, significant changes. This is where I'm going to try to hold myself to 1 to 2 sentences summarizing very, very large chunks of American history. So if I say something that doesn't make complete sense or you want to know more about, please, 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 I encourage you, get on Wikipedia, look it up. Alright, so I'm going to try to put it into 4 chunks. These are Mr. Buckley's 4 chunks of national security policy history. So, first step, isolation. So, what was America concerned with from the beginning, essentially the beginning of the country, 1776, until the World Wars? We were concerned with ourselves. We were also concerned about building up our power. We had some smaller wars with other countries to get more land or get more economic influence in the Western Hemisphere. But for the most part, we were worried about ourselves. We were just looking out for ourselves. Second era, we got pulled into large conflicts around the world because we knew that we had the ability, we'd become a very wealthy country, and we needed to help out our allies. Otherwise, the world would become unstable or people would be in power that would not be friendly to America. So the World Wars, First World War, we came to the aid of France and England and the Allies to defeat Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. We know that. World War II, we defeated mainly Germany with some help from Italy, as well as Japan, fascist countries, so countries that were super authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorships that were very ethnocentric, concerned with themselves and wanting to literally control the world, wanted everybody else to be controlled by them. Since the end of World War II, the definitions of the good guys and the bad guys have gotten very confusing. era number 3, the Cold War. So after World War II, so we vanquished Germany and Japan. The two main superpowers left were us, so the USA, versus the USSR, Communist Russia. So it was communism over here versus capitalism. Two very different ways of life. And at the end of World War II, recall that World War II with Japan ended because of the atomic bomb. The Cold War was considered a Cold War because we were wanting to defeat one another, but we never actually fought each other. But we spent a heck of a lot of money trying to scare the others into never attacking us. So we both sides built up giant nuclear arsenals, and that could destroy the entire world 10 times over with the nuclear firepower that we created. Giant militaries, very, very tense times, for lots of complicated reasons that we don't need to go super into. But essentially we outspent, our economy was stronger, and the USSR couldn't keep up with us, and the Cold War ended, and Eastern Europe and Russia fell apart. So it's no longer communist Russia. Communism fell apart at the end of the Cold War, which ended in, depending on your definition, 1989, 1990. So ended in my lifetime, but before you guys came around. So the era that we are currently living in, I've called globalization. This is characterized by interconnectedness. Right? I want us to focus on era number 4, please. Right? Interconnectedness. When we're saying interconnectedness, I want you to think of a spider web. Right? That spider web, everywhere one of those threads crosses, that's a country. Okay? That's a city, whatever. Right? You cannot shake one point on that spider web without it shaking dozens and dozens and dozens of other spots around it. All right? The globe, because of technology, because of the advances in transportation, because of our constant melding of cultures together, we are interconnected. Right? And no country is isolated from anyone else. What happens in one country affects another all the time. All right? Also, part of the globalization is the rise and fall of other countries. As I said earlier, communist Russia fell apart, so the U.S. is considered the lone superpower, but we've had the rise of China, India, all right, and also South American countries. I'm just going to write SA for now. So mainly Brazil, but other countries have become a lot more powerful. Germany has come back and is a very powerful country, very strong economy in Europe. Also, other countries that were traditionally world's powers are less relevant as they were before. Great Britain, France, Russia, not as significant as they used to. But, as I said before, America is the most powerful. So, current issues facing national security. What problems or concerns does our government face in keeping America, and America's interests strong? First, protecting American interests. We want to protect our economy, making sure that we have the energy we need, making sure that our companies and us as individuals can continue to, quote-unquote, pursue happiness, right? Make money how we want around the world, as well as promote democracy. We're worried about money, we're also worried about democracy, because throughout history, it's kind of a trend that's seen that democracies don't go to war with each other. Democratic countries don't go to war against each other. So part of it, protecting our economy, we need to protect our allies so that we can keep trading with them, so that they're strong enough that if another conflict breaks out, that we can all defend each other. Some main allies that are currently at risk, so the kind of hot spots around the globe, we have Japan and South Korea. You've heard on the news, North Korea making a bit of noise. They're very close by. They are very close allies with us. They are very big economies. We're very strong trade partners. So Japan and South Korea we are concerned about, as well as Israel is always a hotspot. Okay, it's a Jewish nation right in the middle of the Middle East that often has threats militarily from Islamic extremists. So, current issues, we're trying to continue to protect our interests, all right, and involve protecting our economy at home and abroad, and protecting our allies. The main threats are nuclear proliferation and terrorism. So, nuclear proliferation. Proliferation is the spread of something, so nuclear proliferation is the spread of nuclear weapons. The spread of nukes. Okay? We do not want the spread of nuclear weapons, right? One hydrogen bomb can can destroy a city, right? For a long time now, nuclear weapons have been pretty controlled. We know where almost all of them are. We know who has them: the United States, France, Britain, all right? So our allies in the Cold War that were on the capitalist side, and then Russia and China. They were on the communist side during the Cold War. And then India and Pakistan also have nukes. India and Pakistan are enemies with each other. There's a few other countries that may have nuclear weapons or are trying to develop them, and that is Iran and North Korea. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Israel also likely has nuclear weapons, though they won't officially say it, but it's very, very likely. So we do not want the spread of nuclear weapons. Right now we know who has them, and we know that all of them are stable governments that are not going to use them in a dangerous way and are very aware that nukes should not be used. All right? So that's why nuclear proliferation is threatening. Right now, if nuclear weapons spread to other countries, they might fall into the wrong hands. It sounds like a movie script. It's used all the time in movies, but we're worried about nuclear proliferation because if a nuclear weapon gets into a wrong hands, somebody that would not take care of it responsibly, use it only in absolutely extreme situations, that could cause a lot of death and threats to others. The other main one that we hear about pretty often is terrorism. I just want to use this as a quick sidebar to give a proper comparison so we can make sure we understand terrorist organizations and how they fit into things. So Al-Qaeda is the most well-known terrorist organization, right? Islamic extremists, yes, they claim to be following the Muslim faith, but I want to make sure that we have a clear comparison. Al-Qaeda is to Islam as the KKK, yes, the KKK is to Christianity, all right? The Ku Klux Klan claims to be invoking the Word of God. They burn crosses. They're claimed to be following the Bible, letter of the law, but twisted into their understanding and are often violent, terrorist, terrorizing organization. So I want you to think of Al-Qaeda as a very extreme perversion of the faith of Islam, akin to how the KKK has twisted Christianity into their own prejudiced point of view of the world. Why is terrorism threatening? Well, it's not a country that we can see and follow and have diplomatic relationships with. Terrorists, our point is to not be seen. Their point is to frighten people. Let's get a few things written down here for you. So, generally unseen, scattered, right? There's no Al-Qaeda headquarters that we can destroy or go visit and try to talk to people. They're unseen, scattered, and with little to lose. With little to lose. There we go. Alright, so our resolution for debate. Some facts. So, we have the current threats, nuclear proliferation. We need to keep the world stable, right? We need to keep our allies strong, make sure that nuclear weapons are maintained the way they're supposed to be, make sure that countries that have nukes are stable and not threatened by others. We also have terrorists that are unseen, scattered, very difficult to track down. To do that, you need a lot of individuals, very strong military communicating with one another to find terrorists before they're able to attack. So the current level of defense spending, so spent on national security, this is approximate numbers, is 20% of the federal budget. 1 out of every $5 tax money goes to be spent on defense. That's approximately $700 billion. $700 billion every year gets spent on just simply defending the country and defending American interests. We outspend the next biggest spender 6-1. So China is the next country in terms of who spends the most on national defense. We spend 6 times what they spend. All right. The next lowest, third place, is smaller beyond that. We way outspend anybody else. And we are the largest power, but I wanted to put those facts out there because the resolution is, in order to significantly reduce the federal budget and make available money for our other government departments, national defense spending will be reduced by 10%. Right, so we're going to cut $70 billion from the defense budget. There's a good amount in your book. I'll post additional things online about defense spending, so be ready for our debate on whether or not we should be reducing our spending on defense. Thanks for listening.